In this video we're going to go deep into breaking down the 6 secrets I learned from playing Alan Wake. This video and this tutorial is going to be a masterclass in level design storytelling. Alan Wake came out in 2010 and it is a third-person action-adventure survival horror game developed by Remedy. And if you played any Remedy games, you know they're heavily influenced and based on storytelling and character development. And I'm a huge fan of Remedy games, from the first Max Payne that I played when it first came out, to some of the later ones, Quantum Break and Control. And everything Remedy Games does is extremely well written, has the depth and the gameplay to back it up. Now, Alan Wake was heavily inspired by Stephen King and a movie that most people haven't seen or don't mention it when they talk about Alan Wake, In the Mouth of Madness. Great film that has some similarities in a writer being stuck between his nightmare and real life. So when I played Alan Wake, of course I wanted to play the game, but then I also wanted to play in order to learn what Remedy did in order to craft the single player experience and the story driven experience, and how they used it within single player level design. So that way I can learn something from it and apply it to my own work. And by the end of the game I walked away with about 12 pages of notes. Now, since Alan Wake is a third person action game, action adventure survival horror, these storytelling secrets that I'm about to show you of course apply directly with examples from Alan Wake. But these principles can be applied to many other games because these are storytelling principles. And storytelling does not change. It's just how they're applied to a specific genre does. So you can use these 6 secrets that I'm going to show you and apply it to first person or third person or a variety of genres. And also, an important side note, this following tutorial is based on the experience and opinion and the conclusions that I reached while playing the game. So nothing here reflects actually what the developer and the publisher had intended when they were creating the game. So this is my walkaway, my conclusions from it, and what I was able to extract from it based on my experience. So let's get into it. So if you enjoyed the content that I've been putting out over the last decade, including this video, please consider supporting World of Level Design by visiting and downloading any of the premium tutorials that I've been putting out, as well as you can also make a donation to help me continue making these tutorials. And before I jump right into our first secret, this tutorial of course will feature spoilers. So if you haven't played the game, and you should have, it's been over a decade, but if you haven't, then this will ruin some of the plot points and what happens in the game. Storytelling secret number 1. Use of primary and secondary levels. Alan Wake is a single-player, third-person adventure horror game with heavy emphasis on storytelling. So for such a game, each level design decision has to be filtered through a game's story. Each level has to reveal a part of the story, introducing or continuing specific plot points, specific beats, locations of the game, and its characters as the player progresses. Alan Wake is broken down into 2 types of levels: primary levels and secondary levels. A primary level usually reveals a major plot point which moves the story forward and the game forward, and primary levels include game objectives, obstacles, cinematics, scripted events, and heavy emphasis on combat. A secondary level helps to build player connection with the game's world. Secondary levels include visiting or exploring locations, meeting characters, interacting with the locals, and simply learning more about the game's world. This is where you are allowed to explore the location on your own terms without having to fight or survive. An example of primary levels include going to the gas station.
The gas station was my best bet. They'd have a phone I could use. It looked like a long hike through the forest to get there.
Lovers Speak.
You can see them too?
Hell, of course I see them. Come on, we gotta move.
Mining and Ghost Town. Escaping Cauldron Lake Lodge. Going to Anderson's farm.
You're gonna have to find your way around to the farm out! I'll be waiting!
Going through the town.
We can make it through the bookstore. Wheeler should be waiting for us in the backyard.
Bright Falls Light and Power. Bright Falls Dam. And Larson's Auto Salvage. An example of secondary levels include the first level on the boat, who is just simply able to walk around and enjoy the view and talk to the characters on the boat.
Let's act like we're on vacation. Go stand next to that old gentleman there. I want a shot of you with the town in the background.
Visiting the diner to get the cabin keys.
Try the coffee. Just don't blame me when you fall in love, 'cause it'll break your heart when you have to leave.
Visiting the bird-like cabin with Alice.
I'll get you inside safe and sound before it gets dark. And I've got the flashlight.
Driving to the mining caves. Visiting mobile homes, the sparkling river estates.
I heard on the radio you were visiting. Well, I'll show you her trailer.
And the New York City flashback.
Coffee's on.
Great, thanks. I'll need it if I'm gonna finish this by tomorrow.
The sequence of each level, primary or secondary, should always be determined by the game's story and how you want to communicate that to the player. With primary and secondary levels, it allows you to design how you want the story and the game to unfold and at what pace. So the takeaway is, level design decisions have to be filtered through the game's story. And to tell the game story effectively through level design, you have to weave the primary and secondary levels through the game. Storytelling secret number 2. First level is a tutorial blueprint. First level in Alan Wake is a tutorial. This is very common to a lot of games, and it introduces the player to the game's world, gameplay mechanics, and its story. But this first level is more than that. It's a blueprint to learn from. To create the tutorial level, you have to know the game, understand its gameplay mechanics, and use level design to create the playable space. So here are some questions for you in order to decide and create a blueprint level. If you had to design the first tutorial level for your favorite game, what would you do? Or maybe for your own game. How would you teach the player to play the game? What would you create? How would you design the level? How would you want the player to start, advance, and progress through this first tutorial level? And what would you leave out? In Alan Wake's first tutorial level, I learned the basic gameplay mechanics of the game, the entire theme of the game, guiding you with light, and you should always be moving towards the light and away from the dark. And this is an important level design principle. You learn the combat system and how to use light to fight. It gives you introduction of landmarks, which are your focal points in the level that help you guide the player. These landmarks are used constantly throughout Alan Wake, and we'll go more into this later. You also learn how the level designer set up the first combat area without a weapon, then a single enemy, and then multiple enemies, and how to deal with them. Level design combat is fun to create but requires a lot of thought behind it. And in a blueprint level like this, there's a natural progression you follow for teaching the player the combat mechanics. So the first area contains an enemy armed with an axe, and you are unarmed, and this teaches you how to dodge. The second area gives you a light and a weapon, and this teaches you how to use light and how to shoot. And then the third area introduces multiple enemies, putting everything together, dodging, running, escaping, using light, and shooting. You also go through a few hard gates in the level. These are locations in the map where you jump down and are unable to backtrack or get back to that previous location. You also learn using the F key to focus in order to see what the level designer and the game designer would want you to see and what things you need to pay attention to in order to progress the story and the level forward, so you do not get lost or miss important elements in the game. It introduces you to running and avoiding environmental hazards, which are repeated constantly throughout the game. And it introduces you to the tornado, which is an important element you experience throughout the entire game and the final boss. So in this short level, it packs a lot of information and gameplay mechanics. It also tells you the beginning of the story and what you will expect throughout the entire game. So the takeaway is the first tutorial level is a very important level to the player. Not only does this level teach you about the game, its story, its gameplay mechanics, and level design, but it also is used as a primer to introduce what to expect and your experience for the rest of the game. Storytelling secret number 3, how to introduce characters. You might ask, what do characters in the game have to do with level design? Character introduction and their development are dictated by the game's story. But as a level designer, you have to create the playable space where these characters are introduced and live. So it's up to you to design the world and arrange the sequence. Just with the first few minutes of playing Alan Wake, most of the game's characters are introduced, and all of them make constant appearances throughout the game after. In the beginning of the game, during the boat ride, you are introduced to 3 characters. Ban Mott.
Let's see who has the last laugh, silly boy.
Pat Main, the radio host,
Hello there. You picked a good time to visit our town. Deerfest is just 2 weeks away.
and Barry, Alan Wake's agent.
Yeah?
Hey, bestseller, how's my favorite writer? Are you there yet?
And of course, Alan's wife. All are important to the game. Next, in the diner, 7 more characters are introduced. Rose,
I got the cutout from the bookstore when they took it out of the window.
Ranger Rusty,
Try the coffee. Just don't blame me when you fall in love, 'cause it'll break your heart when you have to leave.
Anderson brothers,
Do me a favor, Sonny! I could really use a tune right now.
Cynthia Weaver,
Don't go in there, young man. You can hurt yourself in the dark.
Barbara Jagger,
Cauldron Lake is a special place. Very inspiring.
and Carl Stuckey.
Hey, wait! Mrs. Wake! Your keys!
All these characters that are introduced at some point come back into the game. No character that is important to the story comes out of the blue. They're first introduced in a casual way, usually through a secondary level, and then make a reappearance later. Even at the sheriff's station, when you are inside the jail cell, you meet a guy who is later makes reappearance on your way to the Andersons' farm.
Thank you, man, thank you. Hey, you're all right. You're a good guy.
I know you. You were in jail the other day.
And this is how you connect your game world together. Of course, you can't introduce every single character in the first few levels, but you can mention them through dialogue, props, or cinematics, such as Emil Hartman. He's an important character in the story, and he's introduced through dialogue from Ellis
Dr. Hartman, I read a book of his. He has a private clinic here.
and through props, such as the book in Alan Wake's car.
Among Alice's things was a book, The Creator's Dilemma, by a Dr. Emil Hartman.
Most of the characters' introduction happen within the forced area, such as the bow ride, the diner, sheriff's station, to make sure that you don't miss them and what they have to tell you. So the takeaway is, introduce as many characters in the beginning in a casual way using a secondary level. And then reintroducing them later will make more sense to the player because you already met them. And never have a character that is important to the story come out of the blue, come out of nowhere. Reveal the game's story and its characters deliberately. Storytelling secret number 4. How to introduce game's locations. Locations of the game are introduced to the player in similar way as the characters. You first visit most of the locations casually in the safety of daylight. You can explore and talk to the locals. Such locations include the diner, Elderwood Visitor Center, Sheriff's Station, Birdlack Cabin, Sparkling River Estates, and Cauldron Lake Lodge. You're allowed to explore, learn the location's history, meet characters, and just enjoy the scenery. Most importantly, and probably without realizing, you learn the location's layout, since you will be coming back here later at night. The effect of these locations would not be the same if you had to only visit most of these locations at night and for the first time. There wouldn't be a connection made between the player and the game's world. Another advantage is you only have to create this location once, then reuse it at a different part of the game with different lighting and different gameplay. Of course, not all locations are introduced in the daylight, then visited later at night. There has to be a balance, and it has to make sense. Many are only visited once, such as Bridgefall Power and Light, the Dam, Anderson's Farm, the Coal Mines, Ghost Town, the radio station, and Larson's Auto Salvage. So takeaway for this secret, introduce the game's location first in a casual way through the secondary level. Allow the player to explore and learn the layout, and then you can reintroduce it later in the game as a primary level. Storytelling secret number 5, level design landmarks. One of my favorite techniques used in the game is to show the final destination where the player has to reach right at the beginning of the level. This is used constantly throughout Alan Wake. It gives you a landmark, a way to orient yourself, and then it guides the player where they need to go. This landmark is often seen throughout various parts of the level. Some examples are the lighthouse in the tutorial level It is seen right from the start, and it's where you end up going. Gas station at the car crash is seen right at the start, and it's your final destination. The railroad bridge is shown right at the beginning of the level, and you end up circling back around through the forest, going under the bridge. The Anderson's farm is seen in the beginning, and it's where you end up going. Bright Falls Light and Power is another landmark. And of course, the dam. So the takeaway for this secret is design a level in a way as to show the player their final destination, the location they will end up reaching by the end. This gives the player a direction to head and a way to orient themselves within the level so they don't get lost. They will always know where to go. Storytelling secret number 6. Use foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a warning or indication of a future event. It's a form of storytelling used in all genres of fiction, movies, and games. And in Alan Wake, foreshadowing is constantly used in the story, in the characters, in level events, props, and upcoming obstacles. Anytime you interact with a character, they often tell you what you should be aware of, afraid of, and what you need to look out for, foreshadowing future events. For example, in the diner, Cynthia Weaver foreshadows the absence of light as something to be afraid of.
Don't go in there, young man. You can hurt yourself in the dark.
I think I can handle it, ma'am.
The mood and the atmosphere changes as you walk through the shadowed hallway. Another foreshadowing example is the history of the Cauldron Lake, as told by Barry when you are visiting the Sparkling River Estates.
As I was saying, Al, I found all sorts of weird stuff from the local newspaper's archives. This place is crazy. Disappearances, mysterious deaths, urban legends come true, and get this, most of this stuff takes place around Cauldron Lake.
Cauldron Lake is a place you visit often and come back to at the end of the game. You can also do this with props. Anytime you pick up some items, it foreshadows an upcoming event where you'll have to use them, such as the flares when you have to follow Ben Mott and protect them, or when you pick up a set of flashbangs which you end up using very quickly right after.
There was no way the flashbang grenades were standard power company equipment.
Introduction of all the characters in the beginning is foreshadowing all of their comebacks at various parts of the game. Another example is foreshadowing of Cauldron Lake Lodge in the distance when you first arrive to the bird-like cabin with Alice, a location which you will visit later in the game.
Alice had told me about Cauldron Lake Lodge. The old building used to be a hotel, but these days it was no longer open to the public.
Also going back to the previous storytelling secret, many levels feature a landmark in a distance. This is foreshadowing the location to where you will end up going, such as the lighthouse, the gas station, Anderson's farm, Bright Falls Power, and the dam. When you are going through the forest, the atmosphere will often change from calmer to sinister, foreshadowing the arrival of the Taken. Some additional examples to kinda hit the point more home. Some props in the game foreshadow their reappearances later, such as the large prop, the Deer Fest truck, which can be seen from the boat at the beginning of the game, then at the gas station, and later at the town level. Now, this doesn't contribute anything to the story, but it builds a connection with the world by having something foreshadow itself and then make a reappearance over and over again, creating a connection. Emil Hartman's book In the Car foreshadows an important character in the game that hasn't appeared yet.
Among Alice's things was a book, The Creator's Dilemma, by a Dr. Emil Hartman.
Crows are another recurring element throughout the game. They first appear at the bird-like cabin and constantly make additional appearances throughout various parts of the levels, and they foreshadow something's bad about to happen. Many of the manuscript pages that you collect throughout the game, they foreshadow an event that is about to happen.
I stepped into the gas station's garage. It was dark and quiet. The place was a mess. It looked like someone trashed the place or that there'd been some kind of fight. Light spilled into the room through an open door at the back, and I made my way toward it. Without any warning, I was blinded by a bright light. An old portable TV on the shelf had come alive by itself. Impossibly, I could see myself on the screen, talking like a madman. I'll keep writing. Outside there's only darkness. Outside the cabin, outside the story, there's only darkness. I can feel her presence in the dark. Just now, I could smell her perfume in the room. I'll reach her, I'll fix it up.
So there are many examples of foreshadowing in the game, and it is something that you should use in your own environments and level designs. So the takeaway is, use indication of a future event in your game environments with characters, locations, dialogue, and props. Reveal the story, show locations, build tension, and create connection with foreshadowing. So these are the 6 storytelling secrets that I learned from Alan Wake as I was playing it. A lot of these are principles in storytelling being used in movies, in books, and of course in other games, and Alan Wake does this perfectly. And it's a great masterclass, it's a great study on how to use these in your own game environments and in your own level designs and in your own game. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive, hope you learned a lot, something you can walk away and begin to implement in your own work. And again, if you enjoyed the tutorials and the courses that I've been putting out for more than a decade, then please consider supporting World of Level Design so I can continue doing this more and more by visiting and downloading any of the premium tutorials that I've released or by making a donation. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.